Welcome to SOS for Your Life, Emergency Wisdom for Everyday Life. I'm your host, Susie Angelo, and thank you for being here. Today's episode is called Why? Why me? Why now? Why God? And today I'll be talking to Debbie Simmons, a mother of 9 through the miracle of adoption, and a woman whose legacy was born through loss. After the heartbreaking death of her quadruplets, her journey through grief became a catalyst for purpose-driven growth. Today, she's the CEO and founder of Anchor Point, a faith-based nonprofit that empowers families, supports women in crisis, and equips leaders to navigate trauma with clarity and strength. Debbie's passion is helping others find clarity, courage, and confidence in their calling, inspiring them to live fully, love deeply, and leave a lasting impact. I know you're going to love her story. This podcast is for you if you know you want to change something. Maybe it's your career, your health, or another aspect of your life. And you might wonder if this is the right age or stage in life to make a change. And you don't know where to start. Or maybe you're that person caught in analysis paralysis. I see, I understand, I used to feel the same way. Well, take heart. You can listen and watch this podcast and find 1 or 2 steps that are going to help you. So just stick around, drop in, and a reminder, you can find this podcast on Spotify, YouTube, iHeart, Apple, and Amazon platforms. And remember to like, share, and subscribe. Let's get into today's episode and meet my guest, Debbie Simmons. Hi, Debbie.
Hi, glad to be here with you guys.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you too. Welcome to SOS for Your Life, Emergency Wisdom for Everyday Life. And I'm so excited that you've joined us today, and you have such a great story that I'm eager to have people hear or see and get to know you better. So why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself and your journey, and then we'll get into some good questions, I'm sure.
Okay, good. All right. Well, what I always tell people is my story has some highs and it has some lows, and we just kind of buckle up and we're going to ride the ride. But if most of us have dreams when we're younger about like what we want to do or what we want to accomplish. And I had this dream of being this young grandmother. And so it's kind of crazy, but I'm like, I can do anything. So I need to find a guy, fall in love, get married, have children, then I can be this young grandma. And so when I went to college, I did get my engineering degree, but I also found the guy, fell in love, got married, and I was like, let's have children because I got to get to these grandchildren, right? And the long story short is we struggled with infertility for years. And that was such a difficult time, like for my identity of trying to figure out like why I can't get things to work the way they should work. And am I a failure and all these things. And so there was all this stuff wrapped up in there. And at the very, very end, before we stopped trying, we finally got pregnant. And originally we were diagnosed with twins. Then we thought I was going to miscarry around 13 weeks, and I was so bummed. And we went to the high risk doctor, and we found out we weren't having twins; we were having quads, and that's no small thing. That's a lot, 4 kids. And our goal quickly became to see if we could get these babies to 30 weeks, because that would be when their lungs, they have a really good chance of survival at that point. And so we started on that journey, and it's not that simple. Think about it from an audience standpoint. How many of you guys have, eaten for 5 every meal, every day? And it's like, it's a big deal, right? And so we knew it was a pretty big step for us to make it to the next day, each day. So we started walking, and I do remember there was one time I fell apart in there, and my mom goes, why don't we just take it one day at a time? Because I was way down the road to when these kids were getting married and all this stuff. And I was stressed out. And she was like, let's just do one day at a time. And I was like, oh, that's all we can control. Okay. So, I reset and we went. And around 26 weeks, I found myself standing in water. And one of the baby's sacs had ruptured. And they admitted me to the hospital. And the very next morning, contractions came crashing in. And the doctor was like, you're going to have to deliver this one. And I'm like, can't you like stop this and just push the hand back and forget that this is ever happening? And she's like, no. And I'm like, ugh. So I just breathed and I kind of figured my way. I'm like, I'm going to have to figure my way through this. And so a little while later, little Zach was born and they placed him in my arms and I held him as he, drifted off into eternity and just spent my time loving him. And then the question became, could my body hold the other three? And it was a question of whether I would get sick and it would reject them and stuff like that. Several hours later, the doctor came in. I have a really bad fever and I'm getting very sick. And the doctor said, you're going to have to induce the other three. And I'm like, is there any way we can not do this? And she just shook her head no. And so I just breathed again. And I was like, I got to figure my way. And several hours later, Josh, Nate, and Chris showed up on the scenes and they placed them in my arms and I held them and I rocked them and I loved them till they each drifted into eternity. And, you know, for me, when I was sitting there that night, one of the things was I was like, how do I figure my way through this? And I figured out that, the number one question that comes to us when we're in a hard time is why. And I was like, why me? Why God? Why now? Why my boys? Why? And I realized that why is a very internally focused question and it's a stuck question. And I wasn't going to be able to figure out how to move forward. And God was just lay down your why. Give me your why. And I'm like, but most of us don't want to give up our whys because it's the last sense of control that I had. If I could just have this answer, it'll make everything better, right? And the truth is if I would have got the answer, it wouldn't have brought my boys back. It wouldn't have stopped my pain. And it wouldn't give me the satisfaction that I was desiring, right? Matter of fact, whatever answer I would have got, what my next thought would have been, why? And it's a never ending cycle. And so I just had to decide to put that down and I began to ask a different question. And the question that I learned there was, how do I survive? How do I figure my way through this big loss and everything? And what I just realized was that, I needed to take whatever my next best step was. And it can vary for a lot of us, but what's my next best step? In my case, God would meet me there, show me the next best step. I do it. And, I like to tell people it's not about being a superhero because sometimes my next best step was like, I don't know, pulling the cover off my head and getting up and brushing my teeth and walking around for 5 minutes and getting back in the bed because that was it. But it was positive motion. And so that next best step really started a healing process. And as I got better, um, I then began to ask a different question. And it was, how do I thrive? I said, I don't want to be stuck in these feelings. I want to have highs and I want to have lows and I want to have joy and I want to be able to smile and I want to live. My life's not over. I want to be able to live even though I've suffered this, tragedy. And as I did that, opportunities began to open up for like grief groups and working with people that have lost children. It led me out of my engineering career. Ultimately, we adopted 9 children from traumatic kind of backgrounds, and so we added those in there. And then it led me to start Anchor Point, a ministry that invest in thousands of people each and every year and gives them hope. And ultimately, writing the book, The Heart of Legacy, and all of that stuff came from walking through that pain. So I go, when people go, who are you? I go, well, I'm a CEO and I'm a mom and I'm a grandma of 15 and I am a legacy architect because I build faith and family and businesses. And that's just that significant event was the thing that kind of defined my purpose and why, I'm here and even with you today. So,
It's interesting. The people I meet that seem the strongest and the most peaceful and grateful are people who have suffered tremendous loss. And I don't know if it's that loss that has charted them on this journey that led them to where they are. I think it has. I think um, it's just the unsuspecting people who don't live in this victim mentality, or they carry their grief on as a badge of honor, or um, sit in that why me for a long time.
yeah, and that why me is such a challenge, right? Because I know women. I mean, my boys were born 30 plus years ago, and I know women that lost children around the same time, and they're still in the same place. And I'm like, I can't be like that. I just can't do that because at that point, in my mind, at that point, I might as well just give up on life because I'm dead. I'm stuck. I can't, and so I'm going, I'm here and I'm here for a purpose. And there's still too much good in my life to let this totally derail me. And that is the hope that I hope people get, is that there is a new day and that we can walk through these hard things and we can do amazing things, because when we do, we leave great legacies, and that's what we want to do. So, but I think what you said is true. The large amount of suffering, when my suffering is very, very high, then I learn very quickly. If I suffer at a lower kind of level and it kind of just goes on, or it seems kind of normal, I don't have the impact of, oh my gosh, what else could I do? I have to figure out how to go forward because there is nothing else.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I always have said about my own journey is the hardest things I've done have been the best things for me. I didn't like going through them, but yet it made me who I am, and a strong, resilient person that I am. And I'd like to ask you how this affected your marriage and your relationship, going through, the loss of your boys, and navigating that to a point where you're moving forward to adopting more children.
Yeah, so that is a wonderful question because most people who lose children end up divorced. Okay. And I think it has a lot to do with is that we don't know how to walk through grief together. Okay. And so he might be feeling okay and I be feeling really down, and it messes up our communication. And then I might start feeling up and he's down, and we no longer know how to connect together, and we're struggling because we're both in a lot of pain and we have to figure out. So we had to make a commitment to have a ton of grace with each other because we never knew which roller coaster, where we were on it, each other, and be committed that our relationship is more important than the struggles that we sit in. And so, forcing ourselves to talk and to figure our way. And he is, in my case, my husband is extremely supportive. And he definitely, men, I have tend to grieve differently than we do. So they might hold things in more and not talk as much. And it makes it harder. And we just want to talk, talk, talk. And then they want to fix me. And I'm like, you can't fix me, and so it's a horrible place for the husband to sit in when the wife is really struggling. I mean, you're both struggling, but she's really struggling, and your job is protect her, and you want to take care of her and like help fix her, and you can't do that. And that's such a helpless feeling that we had to learn to walk through that together, but we had to be committed to us, and so that meant, are there times where I had to be able to say, hey, I just really I can't deal with this right now. I need to like step back from this and then let's come back, and I think that open communication and being willing to do that, and just grace upon grace upon grace, because grief is not a short cycle. And
Not
I tell,
linear.
yeah, and I tell everyone, really, at a minimum, you have a year of new experiences. So what was normal before is now no longer going to be normal. And we have to figure out a new normal. So, you come out of our boys were born on April 1st, and the next major thing after that is what? Mother's Day. And so, how do we maneuver through Mother's Day when I don't have any children to show for Mother's Day, but I'm a mother? And, and so you got all these complicated feelings, right? And then right after that's Father's Day, right? And so, so we have to have grace with each other, and we have to be committed to making the relationship work. So sticking in the messy, and just being consistent with each other, just grace upon grace. That's my whole marriage, but especially in that.
I think the first year, the first to first, and the first year is hard, and even I think that second year is hard or harder in some cases because you've been through it and you're not sure you want to let it go, but you might still be sitting in it, and it's a still an open wound, so to speak. And so did you say after, so many months, let's try again and try to have more kids? Or did you say, I'm not ready yet? What happened during that time?
Okay, well, if you think about it, we actually did struggle with infertility for almost 5 years. Okay, and that, when you get into fertility medicine and stuff like that, it jacks up your hormones, everything else, and then being pregnant with four and all these things, my body is just overwhelmed and depleted. So I didn't like rush back into trying, but I still have this desire to be a young grandma. And I'm like, I have got to have no idea how we're going to do this. And I've tried everything. And so it was probably about 6 months. And we went back to try and get pregnant again. And I made it 2.5 weeks. And I was like, I can't do this. I was like, I just can't. And it had more to do with I was still exhausted and depleted and emotionally drained. But most of it was physically. I just couldn't do it. I couldn't drive to the doctor's office. I mean, because that means you go to the doctor every 2 days. And I'm like, I just can't do this. And so I told him, and he was okay with that. But it was actually about um, 6 years later that we were both working and employed, because he had been in graduate school, then I went to seminary. And when we were both employed, I looked at him and I said, dude, if we're ever going to do this kid thing, I'm not getting any younger. And so if we're going to have to do infertility, fertility stuff, we don't know how long it's going to take. And that is where we ended up in the discussion about, should we pursue getting pregnant again, or should we consider adoption? And we just said, we can spend thousands on pregnancy and end up with nothing, or we can save those thousands of dollars and spend it on a kid that is in the CPS system that needs a home. And so that is how we kind of began to explore this other option, for us as a primary option versus being a secondary plan. Mhm.
Sure. And I know several people who have adopted after exhausting infertility
Mhm.
drugs and things like that. And it is exhausting from what I've seen from
Mhm.
my friends and former clients. So how did 9 kids? How did that come about to adopt multiple kids? And please explain how, that, you know,
How did I
the,
land there?
yeah, exactly. Because I mean, that's loaded. I mean, 9 kids, just,
Yeah.
one, maybe two. and then
Mhm.
then sometimes people get pregnant, after they've adopted a few, they think that all hope is lost. But here you adopt nine,
Mhm.
and how did that come about?
Okay, so this is how this craziness came about was we were sitting there and we just had this discussion about like, we would consider adopting and you go through questions like can I really love someone that's not my blood and stuff like that. And I sat around thinking about that for a little bit and I was like, you know, I guess I can because you know what? I love my husband and he ain't my blood. And that seems to work out all right. So somehow God works in all this. And we knew that we wanted 4 children at least. Okay. And that was my plan originally because I got to be a young grandma and I want lots of grandkids, so I have this plan. And so we knew we wanted 4. And we had been married quite a while at that time, probably about 11, 12 years by that point. And I was like, we should adopt a family group because they're harder to place and we didn't want babies. I was like, I'd like them to be a little independent. So I was like, we would like older kids. And we just began we were open to anything. So we just began pursuing those things. And in our first adoption, we actually ended up with a sibling group of 5. So we just call it a basketball team. So they were 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And they were could dress themselves. It was very exciting. But we were so blessed to have them because they had wonderful foster parents. Um, and they were very it's when you adopt sibling groups are scary, but the wonderful thing about sibling groups is you can see kind of how their attachment styles work and how healthy they are. And a single child, you may not be able to know exactly that. So these kids really were a basketball team when they moved in. I mean, they just took over the backyard and did all these things. And the funniest story in the whole process was the very first night they were there. We're kind of set in our ways, and you need to know that I don't really cook. Okay. And so this is, a major dilemma that's fixing to happen. But anyway, the 6 year old comes running in and he's standing right in front of me and he goes, Mom, Mom. And I'm like, Yes, what do you want? And he's like, What's for dinner? And I look at him and I'm like, Dude, do you ask this question every day? Because I am seriously unprepared for this whole process. And so, for the first 6 months of having 5 kids in there, we ate on paper plates and we figured out how to survive. Because I'm like, I got to have a plan. And fortunately, I have a master's in organizational management. So it kicked in at some point and systems and structures. And we really thought that that was it. Okay. Because 5's a lot. Okay. And it was about 7 years later that I was really convicted that we ought to be willing to adopt again. Not that we would have to do it, but that we ought to. So I talked to my husband, and he was like, Nah, not really interested. We're kind of in over our heads and all this stuff. And I'm like, I'm just telling you, this is what God's telling us to do, to be obedient and turn our application in. And so after about 6 weeks, he held out. He finally came back and said, okay, we can turn the application in. And we talked to the kids and they were super on board. But I'm like, you got to think through like what it's fixing to cost you, right? It's going to cost you, And so we went through that. And within 6 months, we had another sibling group. They were 11 and 13. So we got 11, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. And so we've done for a really long time driver's ed and hormones. That's the big thing at our house. And so when we adopted them, you got a blended family already. Now you're blending a blended family. And it was really hard, but it was good. But it was really, really hard because, the oldest of the youngest sibling group acts older than the youngest of the other. And they want to kill each other because you're not my sister. So we had all these kind of wonderful if you remember the Geraldo show, that's kind of what it looks like periodically at that time and stuff. But we figured it out, and everything. And I was sure 7 was it. And we were not going to adopt more because we would lay in bed at night and say, God, if you're not real, we're crazy. Because everybody else in the world thought we were crazy, but God, we're trying to be faithful to what you called us to do. And my oldest daughter ended up pregnant, and she was in a very difficult situation, and it looked like the child might end up in CPS custody. And I told my husband, this is about 3 years after the last adoption. I told him, I said, I think we're supposed to turn our paperwork in again and to be ready in case we need to do something with this grandkid. Um, or maybe we're supposed to adopt again, or maybe there's something else. I don't really know. My husband was like, no, 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 no. We're not doing that. And he held out about 6 months, and we just both felt confident that we felt confident we were supposed to turn our paperwork in, but that we didn't want to adopt. We were like, no, don't pick us. we just we just want to get qualified. And lo and behold, they were like, oh, you're perfect. And within 6 months, we ended up with 2 more, and they were 9 and 11. And it was brother and sister, and the others were 13 and 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, and 21. And you add a whole nother blended one in there. And our youngest two are a different race. And so you add those complications in, but it's just a nice, wonderful, messy, beautiful masterpiece that, God has used in our lives. To grow us. And do I have grandchildren? Yeah, I got 15 now, so I'm like, I'm on the grandmahood. So we're down to one in the house is what we're down to. So we finished driver's ed, and we have a 20-year-old that's launching into the world, and that's my last one in the house right now.
Oh my goodness. Debbie, when you adopted the first group, you had finished seminary. Is that correct? Did I understand that? Or were
Yeah,
you
yeah.
going?
Mhm.
So I bet you relied on your faith even more so. And maybe was there some training in seminary that you think prepared you for this major adoption?
I think losing the boys and learning to walk through the difficulties of that really strengthened kind of my faith muscle of how to walk by faith. Seminary certainly educated me in a lot of things, and stuff like that. But if you ask us if we really had a clue what we were doing when they first called me mom, I'm like going, oh, this is a really serious commitment I've made. And they called me mom on the first day. They had such wonderful foster parents who had prepared them. The 5 walked in with gifts and said, hey, mom and dad. And I was like, uh, uh, and my husband's like, this is like for real. I'm like, yeah, we're committed for life, man. And we weren't going to back out, but I mean, it was just like this overwhelming magnitude of, so do I know what was coming? We have no idea, right, as to how life is going to roll out and play out. And I will tell you that my 9 children have grown me more than I have probably invested, that I feel like I've invested in them because, you know, God is interested in me becoming more a reflection of Him. And my kids are wonderful at hitting whatever buttons I have. And you know what? I got to go work on my buttons. And so I have a lot of children. I get lots of buttons pushed. And so I'm like, okay, God. But it has made me a better person, to learn how to work through my buttons and get rid of those so that they aren't pushed and I can be fully present. And they have taught me a lot. And so, have I had to depend on my faith thing? Yeah. And I would tell you, as they moved into it, when children have trauma, you got to work through a lot of that stuff. But if they're not ready to work through it, you can't rush them. So sometimes my kids have made it to adulthood or 18 where they know it all. And the world is a very hard place. And so, I've had ones that have lived on the streets and had drug addictions, and I had one that was a prostitute for a while, and I have one that was a drug dealer, and one that decided to pay off his tickets by going to jail. I'm like, y'all are crazy, but these are my kids, right? And so learning to walk by faith in those difficult things and be the parent that is still holding on to heartstrings, but I can't control the decisions, right? And so, how do I plant positive seeds and leave them a bridge to Jesus and just be in that space with them? Because they are my kids and they are valuable and they have great worth and they have great potential. But they're in a deep season. So, like, our daughter that was on the streets for about 7 years with drug addictions, she's now been sober for 3 years, and she's such a joy. But she's a real pain in the rear end when she was a teenager, and then being on the streets was just horrible. When the police called and say, "We come get her," and I'm like, "No, send her to the psych ward." And then she would call me saying she's ready to get out, and I'm like, "Are you ready to go to rehab?" "Nope. I wanna go back to the guy." And I'm like, "Call me when you hit bottom. I'm here for you. I love you." Yeah, and so this moving into adulthood for these kids, oh, it's just sometimes, we as parents wanna be able to we can control a lot of the atmosphere till they get to 18, and then the world is just really hard. And so, uh, that's where the faith thing has really come into play, is knowing that I can't control everything and that I have to trust that he loves them more than I do, and that he is writing a good story when it looks like a very bad story. And it's been good. And if not, maybe my children would be dead or lost to the world, right? And they still have they still have good stories, and we have to trust that. Yeah.
Well, you and your husband were saviors for them, for all of them. And uh, are out of the nine, are they all, or how many of them are spiritual as are spiritual people? Are they all?
Well, I would tell you, hey, we're all on a journey, and some of them don't look like they are, but the seeds have been planted, and I just go, God, can I see those bloom before I leave this earth? And then, but you know what? They even as a CEO, my staff, my children, they all are watching, and they all are picking up things. So it is amazing, even if they're making really bad choice. So, like when she's living on the streets, if she experiences unconditional love from me, and I've got boundaries, but unconditional love, and then I still see value in her, she's going to come around over time. And she might not be there right now, but it's in her. It's going to come out. And so we just have to be faithful and keep that there. So they're all in various places, and just like we all are at times. But I know the seeds are there, and I know they watch, and I know that they know the right things. And so I just wait. What's actually been more fun, and I think is really the funny thing is, all the grandbabies that I get to play with, I just pour Jesus into those grandbabies and love them. And they are more spiritually mature sometimes than the parents. And they're like, "Mom, you need to get Lolly's playlist because that's our good music." And so they will, and they're like, "We need to go to Lolly's for the weekend so we can go to church." So they will bring them along too. And so God is doing a work in all of us and still stretching and growing each one of us. And so,
So, as people hear your stories, have you had a number of people who have been on the boat, been on the in vitro and the adoption road, so to speak, reach out to you? I mean, your story is just fascinating. Just the how tough it is to go through in vitro, how tough it is to adopt, how tough it is to witness the struggles that your kids have gone through and the journey they're walking. Have people reached out to you to get counseling or to talk about their journey with you?
yes. So I mean, especially like, or even like losing children. right? Especially before we had the kids, I spent a lot of time with people who had lost children because they didn't they didn't get how I could move past that and I could still smile and believe that there was hope, and so and they would never seek out help from someone who had children because they would go, you don't understand. And so I had tons of opportunity for that. And then our adoptions have been very public, are they're out there. And people we actually, through Anchor Point, the ministry that I run, we actually train families into God's call to the orphan and how you walk through the adoption process, because I find that a lot of people are very open to it, but only about 2% actually do it. And it's all because it just seems overwhelming and we don't know how to work our way through the process. So we train people to understand how the process works and how you walk through it. And I coach a lot of people through that process. And then okay, once you get kids that have trauma in their background, and even if it is an infant adoption, there is still trauma there that we have to overcome, because this baby now has a new mother's voice, a new mother's smell, a new mother's touch, and it's a foreign place to them, right? And so we have to work on connections. So we talk about how do you bring these children into your home, and what do you do to work on getting connections to the heartstrings? Because that is what we have to do if we're going to create safe places so that these kids can work through their traumas, right? And what you and I have to realize is that and this isn't just children, this is just people in general, is that you and I cannot help people through their journeys unless we have been on that journey too. Right. So, and if I'm not growing and dealing with my stuff, then I can't help you go through yours. So, if I want to help my children, I've got to be on the process of dealing with my buttons or my hangups or whatever. And I just got really good at going, okay, God, I got to deal with this. And it's super cute. My kids are blowing it and losing it, and I'm losing it as a mother. And I'm dialing the prayer team that I go to, and I'm like, I need an appointment because I am losing it, and I don't want to be this kind of mom. And so there's something in me that I got to work on, and I want to face that bravely and go work on that and let God work on that so that um, I can be the mom that these kids need. And when they're screaming at me or cussing me out or whatever, that I can look in their eyes and I see their preciousness still, and I hear them say, Mom, I need you now more than ever, but I don't know how to tell you. And they may be cussing me out and it feels really personal, but if I can have that perspective, then I can stay in there and I can go, okay, I'm for you. We're going to figure this out together. And really, that's what Jesus does for us, right? He comes around and puts his arm around and goes, wow, you got a big mess. We're going to work on your mess together. And I'm like, thank you.
What I've learned over the last several years about trauma is trauma is can be multi-generational. So that little baby that was born and in a new mother's arms with that smell could have had trauma going back 3, 4 generations, 5 generations ago. And you don't know that until it starts to come out. But you've got to heal. You got to heal your own trauma too um, in the process. But
And we're all messed up. I mean, we all have stuff and we all bring all that stuff to, you think about 9 kids, 2 adults, 11 of us, and we all got issues. It's like you constantly get the opportunity to lean in and work on your stuff. And I'll tell people, you don't have to work on your stuff right now. You can choose to just stuff this or ignore it or whatever. But I said, our God is so gracious at wanting us to get better that, you know what? He's going to provide you another opportunity. So if you're not ready right now, it's okay. You'll lose it again. Yeah. And so I'm just like, I ain't got time for that. Let's get it taken care of.
yeah, sure. So was Anchor Point your baby? Did you start Anchor Point?
Yeah, about 15 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when did you know that was your next calling?
I had 7 kids at the time, and I was actually working for Chuck Colson in Prison Fellowship and running about 4 states of prison ministry. So I was busy. I was doing ministry full time. I had a full time mission field at my house. And I was like, this is good. I got plenty or whatever. And God kind of planted this seed. Um, why don't you build something that will have an impact now, but that will outlive you? And I was like, no way. I'm like, I work in full time ministry. I got a full time mission in my house. Can't you go find someone else that ain't busy? And I'm like, for real? Are you? And so for about a year and a half, I wrestled with God as to whether I would be obedient or not in that calling. And Anchor Point deals with families. Okay, so all of this stuff is just an expansion of all the things that he's taught me over the years and about family and about life and the value of life and all this stuff. And so it's a natural road for me, but I'm like, I'm an engineer. I don't know how to start a nonprofit. I don't even have a clue. And I'm like, no, God, no, it's going to take a lot of time, money, sacrifice. And I'm like, go find someone else. And he just kept on. And finally, after about a year and a half, he got a little fed up with me. And he, within a week, took my job away. And just there was some misunderstanding, and it was just better to part ways. And so we parted ways. And I'm sitting at the house, and God's like, you got time now? And I'm like, fine, I get it. I got it. You wanted me to clear my thing, and I got it. I will do what you asked me to do. And just committed to begin to walk down that process. And it really was kind of a surreal experience because I'm like going, I don't really want to be doing this, but I'm going to be obedient. And so I'm telling people, here's what we're going to do. And in my head, I'm going, what am I doing? What am I doing? And people loved the idea and began to get behind it even before we opened the doors, and everything fell in line. And my plan wasn't to work in the ministry. It was just to build it, be on the board and everything. And this CEO thing just kind of happened. And it's been a wonderful experience once I got on board. And I'm a much more yes girl now. But it definitely has grown my faith in having to stretch and do that. I mean, for the first 3 years, I worked for free and I wrote checks out of my personal account to pay everybody. And I'm like, this is crazy, but we were never left, destitute or broke. And we adopted again in that time frame. And he's just faithful for us when we are being obedient to what he's asked us to do. Doesn't mean it's easy, but he's been very faithful. And that in itself is just amazing. So that's why it's a fun ride because I don't even plan the future really anymore. I'm just like, okay, what do I do today and tomorrow? It's not like I don't plan at all, but I'm like, God, you're going to direct my path. And so I'm going to trust you to do that. And you've got the big picture and I don't need to worry about that. And so, show us what you want me to build. And I build.
I think, I've had conversations with several people and even in my own journey, it's really hard for me to be present because I'm thinking ahead. I got to do this. I don't like looking back, truthfully. I like, that's the past. I like looking ahead, but I get anxious. And so I have to keep reminding myself to be present and to be in this moment, and I think sometimes when you're in that moments when that magic happens, whether it's, losing a job that ultimately sets you on another trajectory or something else happening, that's part of it. So you wrote a book, and when did that happen?
Well, I was told to do that by God, and we had an interesting conversation. I did it actually about 8 years ago. Okay. And he was like, you need to write a book. And so I was like, this is crazy. And so I just said, fine, I'll be obedient. And I dumped all my words on paper, saved the Word document, and it was called My Gift to God. And I shut the computer and like forgot about it. Okay. And I was just like, I'm not going to do anything else with it. Right. I did it. I was obedient. I wrote the book, da, 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 da. And a year and a half ago, God was like, I need you to get the book out because we're going to take the book to the world. And I'm like, for real? And I was thinking, oh, it's just been a couple of years since I wrote it. I went back and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's like 8 years ago. And I'm like, I've just always known I had to do the book, but I just kept putting it off. And so a year and a half ago, God was like, get it out. And by that time, 8 years is a long time. A lot of things have changed, right? I've adopted more children, expanded what we're doing at Anchor Point. So I just took the time to start rewriting it. And I remember when I sat down with a friend and I was telling her the vision for Anchor Point, and I looked at her and I said, hey, you want to do this with me? Do you want to help me do it? And I said, we want to build something that outlives us. So legacy is important to me. And that became really important when I was in the hospital and I was holding the boys. It may not have been important before, but it was like, it matters. And so everything since that time has been very intentional. So the book is called The Heart of Legacy because I just know we need to live our legacies now so we can leave them later because we're going to actually leave a legacy no matter what we do. Okay. The question is, what kind of legacy do we want to leave? And I just believe that God wants us to do great things. That's why we're here. And so he wants us to be those, pebble throwers out into the water that has this ripple effect. And I mean, won't it be cool to be sitting in heaven knowing that Anchor Point is still here and it was the hope that some young girl needed to keep on going. And eventually she gets to heaven and I get to meet her and she's like, I was at Anchor Point. And I'm like, really? What year? She's like, 20 years after I'm gone or whenever. And I'm like, oh, that's so cool. And I'm going, that's really a cool thing is when we can do that. And I want more people to be able to do it. So that is ultimately the reason that the book is out there is to encourage us all to, live focused and faithful and fearless lives.
Love that.
Mhm.
So let me ask you a question. How is your health during this? Did you struggle with any health issues?
Well, of course.
Well, I know you had the reaction to infertility and things like that, but
Mhm. Mhm.
later on, did you have some health issues?
Sure, of course I did. Well, first of all, being a mom and being busy, I don't care how many kids you have. You live a stressed out life, whether you realize it or not. And, here I am, a girl that is a go getter and runs at 100 miles an hour. And I don't cook. I already told you I don't cook, so that's a problem. And so probably 5 years ago, I was running 100 miles an hour and living on Coke, and
Coca-Cola.
oh yeah, because that's what gets me going, right? And I wouldn't eat, or whatever. And I actually shut a truck door, and it dug into my leg as I was shutting it. So it dug a big gash into my leg, and it actually ended up getting infected. The wound doctor couldn't heal it, and couldn't get this wound closed. And it was almost an inch deep, and I was still working, but now I got staph infection, and so my body is all out of sorts. So I ended up working with a nutritionist, and we were able to get it closed. But it took me 9 months to really get back to any sense of normal. And I remember as we walked through this, I remember sitting in his office and I was going, okay, now that we got the leg closed, I'm realizing that maybe there's something I need to learn here. And maybe I need to make some changes. And he gave me a questionnaire and he said, on the questionnaire, there was a question of stress. And it was like 0 to 10, what's your stress level? 10. And he was like, 0. What's your stress level? 10. And he was like, 0. What's your stress level? 10. And he was like, 0. What's your stress level? 10. And he was like, 0. What's your stress level? 10. And he was like, 0. What's your stress level? 10. And he was like, 0. What's your stress level? 10. And he was like, 0. What's your stress level? 10. And he was like, 0. What's your stress level? 10. And he was like, 0. What's your stress level? 10. And he was like, 0. What's your stress level? 10. And he was like, 0. What's your stress level? 10. And he was like, 0. What's your stress level? 10. And he was like, 0. What's your stress level? 10. And he was like, 0. What's your stress level? 10. And he was like, 0. What's your stress level? 10. And he was like, 0. What's your stress level? 10. And he was like, 0. What's your stress level And I was like, I don't know. It's a good week, maybe a 3. I don't really have a lot of stress. And he looked straight up at me and he goes, "You're lying." And I'm like, "Do you say this to all your patients?" And so we actually tested it out. And there is a test that he does, and he would like you to be under 20 on the stress level. Okay. And he tested me out, and I was like, I don't know, 141, 143, or something like that. And he wanted me to be under 20. Right. And he goes, "See, you're stressed." And I'm going, am I? Because maybe I don't know what stress is. And so what I realized, and as I've gone through the last few years, is, you know what? I didn't have like post traumatic stress disorder. I just had traumatic stress disorder. I was in it all the time. And if you're sitting in it all the time, you don't even realize that you have it. Right. And so
You're
as
too close to the forest to see through the trees.
yeah, or I'm the frog sitting in the boiling water, right? And I'm like going,
Like
it's
that.
all good, but here I have this, this leg could literally have taken me out because what my body was saying was that I can't handle going down and trying to work on your leg because I'm trying to keep your heart pumping. I'm trying to keep your lungs going. And that's all I got capacity to do. That's what my body was saying, right? And so, as I learned things and I began to change my diet, and I have given up Coke, so you'll be proud of that, and work sugar out and all these things, as I began to learn what it feels like to be closer to the 20 score, it was like a complete crazy out of body experience. I was looking at him and I'm like, I need to go crawl in bed for like 6 months because my body was calming down so much that I just didn't realize that you got all this stuff that comes in. So 100 miles an hour, 9 kids, CEO, you got all these things that are pounding on you, but you're not eating well. So now you've got all these internal issues that are creating stress. And you might mentally be processing well, but it's still capacity, So I realized, wow, I don't understand this stress thing. And I am now really, really good at being attuned to what it feels like for my body to be calmer. I never get to 20, just so you know, but I can get in the 40s. Okay. So I'm much closer, but I'm very attuned to like when my stress starts to go up. And that has been so invaluable just for my health in general. And we had another incident probably in the last, probably about 8 months ago, where staph showed up again and just kind of ruptured out on my skin. And it's taken me about, I don't know, 24 weeks to kind of get that back under control. But you know what? My body handled it so much better than before and can handle things. But I realized how much lost capacity I had. And if I didn't change things to focus on some of the nutrition things and to look at the stress and to do all these things that I needed to do, I wasn't going to be here long. And I would be missing out on those young grandbabies, right? And I wouldn't be able to leave the legacy with Anchor Point where I wanted it to be when I transition out or even write the book. And so I don't want to miss those things. So I don't want to prematurely end. And so I'm like, okay, I need to fix these things. And that has been it's been a hard journey because food's just not my thing and I can't eat very much. But it's been very important to learn those things. And so when I'm talking with executives and things like that, I'm like, you got to take this serious and you got to be looking at these things because these things matter and they're affecting us more than we realize. And in this day and age, the stress thing, you just don't even get it. And I was totally clueless. I really was. And he was right. I wasn't lying, but I was clueless.
I could relate to that because I would brag that I'm not on any medication. And then I got my little wake up call when I left my career. And all of a sudden, I would crash after lunch. I mean, my feet felt like weights were on them, and all I could do was crawl basically to the sofa to take a nap for 2 hours. And this is after I left my career. And then I'd be wide awake in the middle of the night. Well, I attribute it to maybe menopause, but then I had other symptoms. And so by this time, I had made a change to functional medicine. And so I was diagnosed with something that I don't think traditional medicine would have caught. They would have treated each individual symptom, but wrapped in its little bow, it's called adrenal fatigue. And so my cortisol was out of whack. I had no fight or flight, and it is directly related to stress. And I thought, I was a superwoman. I could do all these things. I could multitask. When I looked at my to-do list, it was just a challenge to knock them out, and to be all things to all people. And I wasn't taking care of me. I was taking care of everybody else but me. And so it really sent me on a new trajectory of listening to my body, listening to my gut, changing my lifestyle, resting, changing my exercise, and it's manageable now. Do I think, there's really a cure? No, I think you have to manage your stress, and you have to notice, like you've mentioned, you notice when your stress level is creeping up, and I think I didn't have any role models to tell me what stress looked like, because we were told just suck it up and stiff upper lip and just keep doing it. You've got to be a strong woman. And so, I'm grateful for having that, because it really has taught me. But, I was kind of kicked in the teeth, so to speak, and like, you got to do something. There's no way around this. And I'm grateful for the journey, because I do think there's probably a number of women, especially who suffer from something similar, that don't know it. So,
Oh yeah, for sure. And I think one of the most fascinating things about stress in particular is, how we eat plays into stress in our body. It's all internal, but how the organs are functioning together creates a level of internal stress. Okay. How my mind is processing things creates another layer of stress. And then how things come at me in the world, which I can't control, right? That's a whole nother layer of stress. So stress is complicated, and we just think, oh, it's just when I feel a little bit of, worry or anxiety or whatever. I'm like, no, this world is, like we live here in Houston, Texas. I'm going, when a hurricane comes in, it's an external stress that's on me. And then what do? I eat junk food because the stores are all closed and we only had so much food, and so then my body's not operating well. And then, in the last big hurricane, we had water get in the house. And so we lost the bottom floor. So now my head's full of how do I figure my way through this? And I might go, okay, well, that's, a 3 because that's just it for right now. Right. And really, it's a 57 or whatever it is on my scale. And I'm like, okay, I need to realize it's very, very important what I pick to put in my mouth. Because it's going to either it's going to make this better, it's going to make this worse. And so what are the things that I can control? And what are the things that I can't control? And so this is all just, rudimentary stuff that I had to learn to pay close attention to, or like we have a big fundraising gala next week. Well, guess what? The outside stress kind of goes up, and so what can I do to take care of myself in that? And that is, and we kind of need to look at it as a game too. It's kind of fun to kind of learn those things, because I'm like going, no way, I can't have that. What are you talking about? And then, well, what's a substitute for it? That I won't miss it so much, like I figured an alternative for making Reese's peanut butter cups because I like those things, and so I'm like going
You're
sun
sharing
butter
with
and
me.
yeah, I'm going sun butter and chocolate protein powder and I freeze them and they just taste like Reese's peanut butter cups. So, and they're protein and no fat, right? And so I'm going, okay, then I can do that, but I'm not a cook, so it takes a little while for me to get it, but I can get it. Um, and anyway, so it's just so important. And we want to be here and we want to be impact players. And like you said, we don't realize what's going on. And the adrenals and your stress is a super big one for women in particular. And I mean, I talk about it with my staff because, we constantly are in high pressure kind of situations. And they need to take good care of themselves, right? And whether that's debriefing when they come out of a client room or, uh, taking an afternoon off or just, walking the block, like you said, just anything. And if we don't deal with it now, guess what? God's gracious enough, it's going to come up again, right? And we're going to get the choice as to how we go about this. And so that has just been in the last 4 years for me a real journey, but I would tell you, I feel better than I did 10 plus years ago. Right. And I feel like I, have more energy, I have more muscle, but I'm very intentional. Right. And so that I think is the key. And to have a good functional medicine nutritionist person that knows how to walk alongside of you and doing that. I'm working on my own nutrition degree because I'm like, I might as well finish learning this stuff because, how do the different supplements work together, because we're just going to swap over and go over here and learn how to work in this because it's made such positive progress in me over the years.
Yeah, I think I've talked with several other, people who are in the wellness um, world, and they all say, I went through this struggle, and I can help others who are going through that. Or, I want to help people. We all want to help people. It's just what we're called to do. And I think we've got to be open that what works for one doesn't work for all. That we're all individual, but the more knowledge we have, the more we can make better decisions for what's based, in our situation. So yeah. So Debbie, I always ask this question of every guest: what's your SOS? What's one or two things, small things people can do right now besides reaching out to you that they can do to move their life forward?
Okay. So I have a fun one. I try and make it easy to remember. Okay. And it is simply called the best strategy because I think all we really need to be about is figuring out what our next best step is. Okay. So I've broken the word best down into four little pieces. And the first letter stands for breathe. So it's not that complicated, okay? Because this is for me, okay? And so I'm talking about deep breathing, where you like breathe in through the nose, hold it for 4, release it, hold it for 4, do it again. But what we want to do is most of the time when we're facing stress or things like that, is we're operating down in our emotional part of our brain, our amygdala. And that is, we don't generally make good choices there. So this gives you an opportunity to flip to your prefrontal cortex where thinking happens. Okay. And if you're breathing, you are not dead. Okay. So we have a shot here. Okay. Then the E is evaluate. Okay. So here's what I want you to do. I just want you to take whatever is in your head and dump it out on paper or record it or do something. Just get it out of your head. Okay. And then S is step back. So leave that paper aside, go take a walk, go get a latte, go pray, go do whatever you want to get your mind off it. I encourage a lot of people potentially to walk because when we're moving our body, our brain thinks differently. And so you're starting to get kind of a second wind. Okay. 5 minutes, 10 minutes a day, whatever you want it to be. Okay. Then come back to your list and we're going to figure out how to take action. So that's the T. Okay. Is take action. So when you come back and you look at your list that you have dumped, you're now going to take that evaluation to the next level because you'll be able to see, oh, these are feelings that I have about it. So I might be stuck here. This is the actual fact of what I need to deal with. And I did this the other day with one of my friends, and he was freaking out. And I was like, dude, let's get this out of your head. So we got it out of his head. And I was sure that there was like 10 or 15 things in there that we had to deal with, right? When he finally got everything out of his head, there were 2 things. Okay. But all of the emotions were taking up all this space and worry and all this stuff. And I'm like, is this really the whole list? And he's like, yeah, if those 2 things were good, it would be great. And I'm like, okay, let's make a plan, and so take action on one thing that you can find to do to move forward. And it doesn't, like I told you earlier, for me with the boys, pulling the covers off my head, getting up, brushing my teeth, being up for 5 minutes, that was my next best step. Okay. And eventually I got better. So generally, when we come back, we can find one thing that we can do or 2 things and just accomplish those and then come do your best and then come back. And we're not looking for the next right thing. We're looking for the next best thing because right will cause us to freeze. Like, is this really the best thing? Da, 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 da. I'm like, just do something. And so pick one and then do it. But this is a way to get yourself through healing. It's a way to get yourself out of a funk. It's a way to just continually move forward. I use that best strategy all the time, even as a CEO and stuff like that. And my marriage relationship, it's always like, okay, what's the next best thing I can do?
I'm going to put this on a Post-it note. I've got a few Post-it notes on my mirror in my bathroom, and I also put them on my journal. And I love this because it's small, it's manageable, it's easy to remember. I love it.
Yeah. And so if you can't remember the whole thing, though, people go, what's the most important thing? I'm going, please just breathe. Because at least you'll get that prefrontal cortex and you'll figure the rest out. But, if you get the breathing right, then you got a good shot at being able to do all of these. And you don't have to beat yourself up. It's, you're going to get another chance if we don't get it right the first time.
Oh, that's wonderful. I love that. I just really, really love that SOS. So is there anything else you'd like to share that we didn't talk about?
I would just like to say, like, if you have listeners that are struggling, they feel stuck, they got the why, and stuff like that. I want them to know. I would just say to them, you are so valuable, and you are so loved, and you're so cherished. And when your daddy God looks at you, he smiles and he is pleased and he is just wanting you to lean in. And there is a new day. I had a little girl that's from one of my trauma camps, and she texted me a picture of a sunrise this morning. And I said, why did you do that? Because it's very unusual. And she said, because it was so beautiful. And I was like, yeah, God's telling you it's a new day. And so I would just say, lean in, find those safe people, and get the people that can help you on that best strategy. And I would go, hey, if you want your first best step, get the book. It's free. It's my free gift to your listeners. And it's a great next step.
And how do people find that book, Debbie?
You just go to theheartoflegacy.com. So theheartoflegacy.com, and it's right there. And you just sign up and it'll be shipped to you. It's wonderful.
I can't wait. I'm going to get it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Debbie, how can people reach you? Where can they find you?
Sure. I just direct everyone kind of to the website, and it is very simple. It's thedebbieSimmons.com, and you'll find all the social media handles there. You'll find out about coaching, our group coaching, one-on-one coaching, all the different speaking things that I do. You can find that there. And I love, love, love to link arms with people and go on the journey of life together, because I believe that's what it's all about. So if I can do that for any of your listeners, I would love to do that.
Well, Debbie, it has just been a real pleasure and joy to meet you and to listen to you and to talk to you. And your story is inspirational. And I think a number of people can relate to this. And I hope it resonates with a number of people. And I just wish you the best in your journey. And I hope our paths cross again.
Yeah, definitely. And it's been a pleasure to be with you guys.
Thank you. Friends, sadly, that's all the time we have today. Thank you for listening and watching SOS for Your Life, Emergency Wisdom for Everyday Life. And thank you, Debbie, for joining me today. This episode was such a beautiful story of loss and hope and legacy and all the things that lead to a very meaningful and fulfilling life. The journey is not easy, and Debbie will be the first to probably say that. I hope you've enjoyed this episode as much as I've enjoyed having Debbie. And a quick reminder to you on how you can support this podcast. You can like, share, and subscribe. You can send me a review. You can send me any questions you might have, and they might be answered on a future podcast. You can follow me on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. You can also get added to my email newsletter. It's a nice short email newsletter. So feel free to send me your email address, and I'm happy to include you. So until next time, take care, and I hope our paths cross again.